For a century, it has been the most tantalizing tale in modern history. A boy king's tomb, a hoard of unimaginable treasure, and a deadly curse, unleashed from the dust of 3,000 years to claim its violators. The story of Tutankhamun is a legend whispered in hushed tones, a tale of sudden death, misfortune, and supernatural vengeance. The financier, dead from a mosquito bite. The radiologist, dead after examining the mummy. The visitor, dead from a sudden fever. The press called it the curse of the pharaohs, and the world was captivated. But they were all focused on the wrong story. They were looking at the myth, while the truth was standing right there, in the heart of the tomb, patiently cataloging history. This is not the story of a curse. This is the story of the man who broke it. This is the story of Howard Carter, a man whose obsession, patience, and unwavering belief in science made him the single greatest piece of evidence against a legend he inadvertently helped create. Howard Carter was not a wealthy aristocrat or a celebrated academic. Born in 1874, he was a talented, if frail, artist from a humble English background. He first arrived in Egypt at just 17, not as an archaeologist, but as a tracer, hired to sketch the inscriptions on tomb walls. But Egypt, it gets into your blood. Surrounded by the ghosts of pharaohs and the whispers of lost history, Carter developed a singular, all-consuming obsession. To find a lost tomb that most experts believe didn't exist, or had long since been looted. An obsession like that requires a patron. In 1907, Carter found his in the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, a wealthy British nobleman and amateur Egyptologist. Theirs was a partnership forged in hope and funded by Carnarvon's fortune. For years, they dug. Season after season, the relentless Egyptian sun beat down on their excavations in the Valley of the Kings. They found little more than sand, disappointment, and the occasional minor artifact. By 1922, after years of failure, Lord Carnarvon's patience and his funds were running out. He summoned Carter and told him it was over. This would be their final season. It was the ultimate ultimatum. Carter, with everything on the line, made one last, desperate plea. He pointed to a small, triangular patch of ground at the base of a known tomb, an area overlooked by everyone. It was his final guess, his last hope. Carnarvon, moved by his friend's conviction, agreed to fund just one more dig. On November 4th, 1922, it happened. A water boy, stumbling in the sand, uncovered something hard. A step. Carter's team frantically cleared the rubble. Another step appeared, then another, leading down into the bedrock. 16 steps in all, leading to a sealed doorway. Stamped into the plaster were the intact seals of the royal necropolis. It was a seal that hadn't been broken in 3 millennia. Carter sent a telegram to Carnarvon in England with a simple, electrifying message. At last I've made wonderful discovery in Valley. Carnarvon arrived weeks later. On November 26th, with his patron and a small, breathless group beside him, Carter stood before a second sealed door. He nervously took a chisel and made a small hole in the top corner. The air that escaped, stale with ancient history, extinguished his candle. After relighting it, he held the candle up to the breach and peered in. Lord Carnarvon, unable to bear the silence, asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter, utterly overwhelmed, could barely speak. Finally, a response came. Words that would become immortal. Yes, wonderful things. What he saw was a dream. Golden chariots, life-sized sentinel statues, ornate couches carved in the shape of mythical beasts, alabaster vases, and everywhere, the glint of gold. It was not a tomb. It was a treasure house, an antechamber crammed with the worldly goods of a king. And beyond it, Carter knew, lay the burial chamber itself and the sarcophagus of Tutankhamun. They had found it. History was forever changed. But as the world celebrated, the story began to take a darker turn. Just 5 months after the discovery, Lord Carnarvon was in Cairo. He nicked a mosquito bite on his cheek while shaving. The wound became infected, leading to blood poisoning and pneumonia. On April 5, 1923, he died. At the very moment of his death, a massive power outage plunged all of Cairo into darkness. Back in England, Carnarvon's favorite dog, Susie, howled and died suddenly. The media had its story. The curse of King Tut was born. The legend grew with every subsequent death. A radiologist who x-rayed the mummy died a year later of a long-standing illness. An American railway executive who visited the tomb died of pneumonia soon after, which he had contracted on the boat ride over. Another visitor, Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey, was shot and killed by his wife, a tragedy of domestic violence, not ancient magic. Of the 58 people who were present when the tomb and sarcophagus were opened, only 8 died within the next dozen years, most from explainable, natural causes. And while the world was gripped by this supernatural soap opera, where was Howard Carter? He was in the tomb, not as a victim, but as a guardian. He wasn't cursed, he was busy. The discovery was the easy part. The real work, the work that would define his life, was the preservation. For 10 solid years, Carter and his small team meticulously recorded, sketched, photographed, and cataloged every single one of the 5,398 items. It was a painstaking, scientific endeavor of unprecedented scale. He was surrounded by the very dust and air that was supposed to carry the curse. Modern science suggests that dormant bacteria or fungi in sealed tombs could potentially pose a health risk, but Carter was methodical. He understood the need for care and ventilation. He lived and breathed Tutankhamun's world for a decade, and then he retired. Howard Carter, the man who opened the tomb, the man who touched the sarcophagus, the man who looked upon the face of the boy king, died in 1939 at the age of 64 from lymphoma. A perfectly natural death, 17 years after making his cursed discovery. In the end, Howard Carter is the single, undeniable fact that shatters the myth. He's the curse breaker, and he broke it not with a counterspell or a lucky charm, but with dedication, science, and an unwavering respect for the history he had uncovered. The real curse of Tutankhamun was the very real danger that his story, his treasure, and his world would be lost to time or destroyed by looters. That is the curse that Howard Carter truly broke. He saved it all, for all of us. And that is a legacy more valuable than all the gold in Egypt.